opening my raw camera image in Photoshop. I'm using this image I took of myself with my DSLR's flash, and using the flash is really important because you need those flat shadows and highlights that are impossible to add later in Photoshop. So first thing, I'm going to raise the temperature a little bit and skew the tint more towards magenta. We want to bring down the highlights so that they're flatter and bring down the shadows to make the flash feel a bit brighter. We're going to increase the whites to bring out the flash and decrease clarity / dehaze to soften the image and start getting that fuzzy quality that Polaroids have. And then I'm going to desaturate a little just to go with the 90s aesthetic. Moving on to curves, I'm pulling up the blacks, the left corner of the curves, and then pulling down the point second to the left to be almost in line with it. Then I'm pulling the point second from the right up above where it was originally to create that S curve. Next, I'm reducing noise in the photo by bringing the luminance up. And after that, I'm split toning to give the image tints in the shadows and the highlights, which I'll refine later in a selective color layer. I'm giving the highlights a blue tint and the shadows a greenish yellow tint. I'm enabling corrections for the lens I was using, and then adding back in a vignette to keep focus on the center of the image. Next, I'm just going to add a little more grain in and increase the roughness. And then lastly, for this image in particular, I'm going to go back and reduce the exposure since it was shot during the day and is a little bright. And then I'm going to play with the HSL tabs to get the colors more where I want them for this image in particular. So once I've opened the image into Photoshop, first I'm going to crop to get rid of the excess on either side. And then the first thing I'm going to do is add a gradient map. So if you make a green to orange gradient map and then turn the blend mode to luminosity, it creates this great vintage filter for photos. I have no idea how the luminosity blend mode works, but I don't question it. Next, I'm going to use a selective color layer to change the color of the brown fabric behind me. I want to make it more blue, but first I'm just going to get the mask right, and then I'm going to play with the colors to get it to a point where it looks natural. After I'm happy with the color of the fabric behind me, I'm just going to use another selective color layer to blend the subject in the background again. So I'm playing with adding in some blue tones into the whites, which means negative numbers in the yellow range, and then also adding in a little bit of magenta, mostly playing with the whites and the blacks. And then I'm going back to my original selective color layer on the background to just reduce it a little bit more to make it look even more natural now that I've got the two a bit more blended. Now this last step is what really makes it look like a Polaroid. I'm going to create 2 copies of my background layer in case I mess up one and I have a backup. And then on the top one, I'm going to add a Gaussian blur of about 9 pixels and then reduce the opacity to 1/2. And you can see how it creates that glowy, fuzzy effect that Polaroids have. And then lastly, this is totally optional, I'm just going to add in a film dust texture on top using a screen blend mode, and that'll give it a little bit more texture. I personally really like this effect, but I always turn the opacity of that screen layer down so that the effect remains subtle. So that's it for how to make a Polaroid out of a standard flash image. I hope you like this, and let me know what you think in the comments.